Well, strange that you should ask, little girl. Today's adventure, as everybody knows, is going to be possibly a few minutes longer. I'm looking at my timing crew. And GrandMommy got so interested in this story that I kind of made a few notes. And if I look like I am reading, I am reading. And but the story's going to be real good. Okay? So oh my God, they're laughing already. So anyway, well, that night when we last were here telling the story, you remember it was nighttime and Mommy Pig sent the little baby pigs up to their rooms upstairs to go to sleep. And it was raining, and it was raining, and it was raining, and it was storming, and it was pretty bad. But about, I don't know, I'd have to look at the newspaper to see the forecast, but probably about 4 o'clock in the morning, the rain had stopped. And the woods were nice and quiet, and all the little animals had taken shelter in the woods, and they were all asleep. And the little bad wolf was sound asleep when all of a sudden he heard a noise outside. He heard a rustling sound, a little rustling sound. I know, it's a hard word. And he sniffed the air. Now, he smelled a smell that he hadn't smelled for a long, long time. Animals, you know, they have a really good sense of smell. That's what makes them good hunters. And they can smell the air from, like a deer can smell the air, and miles away he can tell if there's somebody out there that's hunting and he needs to hide in the woods. Animals have a very good smell. Well, do you know what the smell was?
What?
The smell was his papa. Now you remember that the big bad wolf had put little bad wolf when he was 2 years old in the orphanage. You remember that? Because he just didn't know how to take care of this little boy. And so he said, I'm going to put him in the orphanage. And off he walked. And Little Bad Wolf had never seen him again. And Little Bad Wolf was 6 years old now. But that smell, because Big Bad Wolf was Big Bad Wolf, he never forgot that smell. Well, sure enough, it was his daddy. And all of a sudden, there was a big shout. And the big bad wolf says, Little Bad Wolf, let me in, or by the hair on my chinny chin chin, I'm going to huff and I'm going to puff and I'm going to blow your house down. Well, what was Little Bad Wolf going to do? Luckily, where he lived, he had dug a tunnel behind this door. He had a door, and behind that door he had dug a tunnel. So he run and he opened the door and he closed it so nobody would see that he was back there, opened up the trap door and jumped in the tunnel, pulled the trap door closed, and off he took down the tunnel. Now, where did this tunnel go? this tunnel went to that great big reading tree. Not the tree, hi Justin, not the tree right next to his house, but that great big reading tree that was so good because of all the leaves and nobody could see up inside who was up there. Aha. And he runs for that tree and he hides up in the top of the tree. Well, of course, the big bad wolf, he huffed and he puffed and he whoosh, blew the house down, just like in the fairy tales. However, it was just a whole bunch of pile of leaves and branches and stuff like that. Boys and girls and mommies and poppies and everybody at home, if you hear what's knocking at the door, nobody's really there. It is the roof being replaced. Sorry about the noise. They'll be here all this week, courtesy. So he's looking around and all he saw was leaves and branches and just a whole great big mess of stuff. Well, maybe, he thought, maybe this wasn't where Little Bad Wolf lived. He thought it was. Yeah? He could smell Little Bad Wolf. Little Bad Wolf's living in the leaves and the branches? Now, where do you suppose these leaves and branches were, boys and girls? It was that great big bushy tree bushy thing. That's where Little Bad Wolf had been living all this time, and nobody knew it because he covered it up so good that nobody could find the door. Nobody knew that it was hollow inside. Everybody thought it was just all straight bushy tree all over. Little Bad Wolf is a smart little wolf for 6 years old. He is a smart little wolf. Well, so the big bad wolf says, well, I guess he's not living here, but I know I can smell him, so he must have escaped somehow. I'll find him. Well, the next morning, he goes to Mr. Farmer Brown, and he says, whoops, wrong page. And he says, Mr. Farmer Brown, I need to talk to you. And Mr. Farmer Brown had just sat down to breakfast. And you know how Mrs. Farmer Brown cooks a good breakfast. She's just as good as Mrs. Piggy. She can cook a breakfast like nobody's business. So Mr. Farmer Brown says, well, Little Bad Wolf, you sit down here and have breakfast with us, and then we will go outside and we will talk. So Mrs. Farmer Brown says, Little Bad Wolf, sweetheart, what would you like for breakfast? I've got some bacon and eggs here and some bagels with some jelly and butter on them. So would that be okay for your breakfast? And Little Bad Wolf says, that would be just wonderful. Thank you. So they ate their breakfast and they got through. And Mr. Farmer Brown says, okay, let's go outside and sit on the tree stump and we'll talk. So they go outside and, okay, they go outside. Can't find my place. They go outside and, oh, here it is. They go outside and Mr. Farmer Brown had an idea of what was going to take place, but he didn't exactly know. And so Little Bad Wolf says, And Mr. Farmer Brown says, what's the matter, Little Bad Wolf? You can tell me what's the matter. And he says, well, you know our reading tree And Mr. Farmer Brown says, yes. And he says, you know that other tree that's down a ways from it? It's not quite so big, but it's real big and pretty. And that bushy tree bushy thingy is right there beside it. And Mr. Farmer Brown says, yes. And he says, that tree bushy thingy, it's not there anymore. It got blew down. And that was my house. That was where I lived. And Mr. Farmer Brown knew that. He knew that. He figured it out, and he knew that. And he gave Little Bad Wolf a hug, and he says, now, sit back down here. He said, we can figure out what you're going to do. He said, you can stay with us for a little while. Upstairs where Princess Hannah slept, that room is open. You can stay there if you want to for a while. And Little Bad Wolf says, well, I'd kind of like to, but I really like my own house. And Mr. Farmer Brown says, well, he says, I got a couple of ideas. He said, you go on back home, and I know you're going to go play with the three little pigs today, right? And Little Bad Wolf says, yeah. Mr. Farmer Brown says, now, Little Bad Wolf, does Piggly, Wiggly, and Squiggly know where you live? No, sir. No, sir. Does Allie the alligator know where you live? No, sir. How about Patty Pig and Sally Skunk? Do they know where you live? No, I never told anybody where I lived, 'cause I was ashamed of it, 'cause I don't have a mama and a papa. So, Lord. So anyway, Mr. Farmer Brown says, now you go home. You're not go home. You can't go home, but you go to Piggly, Wiggly, and Squiggly, and you boys and girls just don't leave. Don't leave before 9 o'clock. And Little Bad Wolf kind of looked at him kind of funny, and he says, well, we don't leave before 9 o'clock because most of us don't get there until 9 o'clock. So off down the road he goes, down the trail he goes, and Mr. Farmer Brown went inside, and he told Mrs. Farmer Brown what happened. I'm sorry, boys and girls. So, anyway, he gets on the telephone, and he calls Mr. Alvin Alligator, Allie's father, and he called Mr. Patrick Pig, Patty's father, and he tells them that my crew is making fun of me for cheering up here. So
not making fun of.
He tells them the story, and he says, now, men, you know that Little Bad Wolf is a good little boy. And Mr. Alvin Alligator says, yes, he is. He's a fine young man. And Mr. Patrick Pig says, he certainly is. He's a really good sweetheart. Well, his house got blown down last night. His father is back in town. We have a problem with that. So I'm going to talk to the chief of police later on today. But what I want to do is I want everybody to gather up any kind of wire, of wood, some nails, and your hammers. If you've got old windows that you don't need, anything that you don't need out in the barn, put it on your wagons and meet at Mrs. Piggy's house at 9 o'clock this morning. And I know men that it's already 7:30, so we really gotta hurry. They just had their breakfast. Of course it's 7:30. Silly. Maybe it might be 8 o'clock by now. And so, and ask your wives if they have any blankets, if they have any chairs or a bed or anything that we can use, and we're going to build the Little Bad Wolf a house and surprise him. Well, Mr. Alvin Alligator says, "Of course I will. I'll load my wagon right now." And Mr. Patrick Pig said, "I will too. I will be down at 9 o'clock sharp in front of Mrs. Piggy's house." So Mr. Farmer Brown, now Mrs. Farmer Brown in the meantime, she's upstairs. She's already in the attic. She's digging out all kinds of things. Cups and saucers, but she only got 2 because she knew that the house wasn't going to be too big. So she got 2 cups and 2 saucers and 2 plates and a frying pan. And then what else did she find? She found a lamp. She had all sorts of things she was going to put in the wagon. Now, Mrs. Piggy, remember, Mrs. Piggy did not know what was going on. And so she looked out the window, and the boys and girls were out there, and they were sitting around talking. So she said, well, they must be figuring out what they're going to do today. And that's what they were doing. They didn't know, so they were going to figure out what they were going to do today. And Little Bad Wolf, he kept looking down the road, and he kept looking down the trail, because he knew something was going to happen at 9 o'clock, but he didn't know what it was. But he knew it had involved Mr. Farmer Brown. And he knew that Mr. Farmer Brown was always full of surprises. 9 o'clock. Here comes Mr. Farmer Brown down this lane, down this little road, and here comes Mr. Alvin Alligator up this lane, and here comes Mr. Patrick Pig this way, and they were all had their tractors out and pulling wagons of all different sizes. And these wagons were loaded with, the piggies are looking around, and Sally and Patty, and they're looking around, and Allie, the alligator, they're all looking, and they're going, what is going on? That's my daddy, and he's got my old bed in the wagon. What's going on here? And the boys and girls were they were like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Well, Mr. Farmer Brown stands up in the wagon, and he says, all right, men, boys, girls, Mrs. Piggy, what we're going to do today, folks, is we're going to go to the woods. And I don't know if you folks knew where Little Bad Wolf lived, but last night, Little Bad Wolf's house got blown in. And he doesn't have a house. So we're going to the woods, and we're going to build him a house. And I don't know how big it's going to be. It's going to be depending on how much lumber we've got here in these 3 wagons and how many nails we got. But we're going to build him a house. Somebody even brought tar paper and shingles that was left over from their house. I think that was Mr. Patrick Pig did that. Oh my gracious sakes, Little Bad Wolf was going to have such a great house. Nobody could huff and puff this house down. So off the trail they went. Now remember, that trail going to the reeding tree and to the big thingy, bushy thingy, was just about that wide. And only one person could get down it. Well, I know it is now, it's that big, because the tractors had to come along and they had to make it wide. And so now it was a nice little lane, just like all the other lanes and roads that goes to the other little boys and girls' house. This was a nice one. Well, they got to the tree, and that tree, bushy tree thingy, it was so pitiful looking. But see, nobody remembered that it was a house. Nobody knew, remember? So they cleared all of that out of the way, and they found the trap door. And Mr. Farmer Brown says, Little Bad Wolf, is this the trap door? Is this the tunnel you were telling me about? And Little Bad Wolf says, yes. And he says, would you like to keep that tunnel? He said, yes, sir. I think maybe I might better need it, just in case I might need it again. He says, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to build your house where that little trapdoor in the tunnel is in your bedroom. So all you have to do is just jump out of bed one night and choo! And down you go. And Mrs. Piggy brought a rug. And we'll put a rug over the trapdoor so nobody can tell that it's a trapdoor. Okay? Oh, boys and girls, you should have seen that house. By 5 o'clock, of course, you know Mrs. Piggy brought sandwiches for everybody. But by 5 o'clock, and it was supper time, they had the cutest little house that you've ever seen. It was so cute. It was about this big, and it had a steeped roof, and it even had a chimney up on top because they built a fireplace for little Bad Wolf. And Mr. Farmer Brown showed Little Bad Wolf how to use the fireplace. He was so excited. Oh, he just was so excited. And they just had a party. They were all tired. And Mrs. Farmer Brown, she had already went home because she knew that Mr. Farmer Brown was going to ask everybody to come to her house for supper. Oh my gracious sake, she had fried chicken, she had hamburgers, she had everything. All collard greens, corn on the cob, fresh candied carrots. She just went all out, and she baked 2 pies for supper. A peach pie and a cherry pie. Now color that. And sorry about that. She knew that they were coming for supper, and sure enough, Mr. Farmer Brown says, now everybody come over to my house for supper. Whoa. The boys and girls were all excited because they knew Mrs. Farmer Brown cooked good. So off they go, and they before they started supper, Mr. Farmer Brown says, now we need to pray for Little Bad Wolf in his new house. And everybody stood and held hands and bowed their head while Mr. Farmer Brown said a nice prayer for Little Bad Wolf to live in his pretty new house. And that, boys and girls, I think is probably the end of our story today. I'm not sure. You want to show the house? That's the house. I don't know if we can see it. That's the house. Thank you. All right, boys and girls. Friday, it will be probably just a single adventure. It won't be so long. But we'll find out. And you never can tell with GrandMommy and her stories. Okay? See you later. Sorry for the tears.